She made dinner for two and said, "Just you and me," and I remember standing there for a second pretending that sentence didn't hit me the way it did, because on the surface it sounded simple, casual even, but underneath it carried weight, the kind of weight that makes your thoughts speed up while you're trying to act normal. And from the moment I stepped inside her place I could tell this wasn't just some random meal thrown together out of convenience, it was planned, intentional, thoughtful, the kind of effort people don't usually make unless they care how the night goes. And as I sat there watching her move around the kitchen, tasting the food, adjusting little details, laughing when something didn't go perfectly, I kept telling myself not to read into it too much while simultaneously reading into every single thing. The lighting was soft, the music wasn't loud, just enough to fill the silence, and there were only 2 plates set on the table, no extra chairs, no distractions, no, "Oh, someone else might join us later," just a quiet understanding that this time, this space, was meant for us. And that's when my mind started drifting back through our entire history trying to figure out how we even got to this moment, because she wasn't just anyone, she was someone I had slowly grown close to over time, someone who knew my habits, my jokes, the way I think, someone who could text me one sentence and completely change my mood, and our relationship had always lived in that confusing gray area where nothing is clearly defined but everything feels charged. We talked often, sometimes late into the night, about random things and deep things and everything in between. There was comfort there, familiarity, and occasionally moments that felt like flirting but were always just subtle enough to deny if either of us ever had to. And that ambiguity made it easy to stay safe but also impossible to relax, because when you care about someone and you don't know where you stand, every interaction feels like a test you don't know you're taking. And before this dinner there had been signs that made me wonder if she felt something more. Lingering eye contact, small touches that lasted a second longer than necessary, the way she'd remember tiny details about things I mentioned once, but then there were also moments where she pulled back just enough to keep things uncertain, and I think that's what made this dinner hit so hard, because it felt like a step forward without anyone saying it was a step forward. And as we finally sat down across from each other, plates in front of us, candles flickering slightly with every movement, I could feel that quiet tension hanging in the air, not awkward tension, not uncomfortable, but that charged kind where something unspoken is present and both people are aware of it, and the conversation flowed easily at first, jokes, stories, laughter, the kind of rhythm you fall into when you've known someone long enough to stop trying, but underneath that ease was a question growing louder in my head with every passing minute, a question I didn't want to ask because asking it meant risking the mood, risking the connection, risking the possibility that I was wrong about everything, and I kept thinking maybe I should just enjoy the night, maybe labels don't matter. Maybe it's better not to complicate things, but the truth is uncertainty has a way of stealing joy even from good moments, because instead of being present you're busy analyzing, and halfway through the meal I realized I wasn't really tasting the food anymore because my thoughts were too loud, so I did the thing I'm usually afraid to do. I slowed down, took a breath, and asked the question as calmly as I could. "So, is this a date?" And the second the words left my mouth, the room seemed to freeze just a little, not in a dramatic way, but enough that I could feel the shift. She looked at me, surprised but not shocked, like she had considered this question herself at some point. And she paused, and that pause felt longer than it probably was, because in that space my mind filled in every possible answer, every possible outcome, the yes that would confirm what I was hoping, the no that would hurt but at least be clear, and what I wasn't prepared for was the answer that lived somewhere in between, the kind of response that doesn't close the door but doesn't open it either, something like a smile, a half laugh, I didn't really think of it that way, or, "I just wanted to spend time with you," words that sound warm and kind but leave everything undefined, and in that moment I realized that ambiguity can be more confusing than rejection, because rejection gives you something solid to stand on, but mixed signals keep you floating, unsure which way is up. And after that the dinner continued, we kept talking, the laughter returned, but it wasn't quite the same, not worse, just more honest, like both of us were suddenly aware of the line we were walking. And as the night went on I started paying attention not just to what was happening, but to how I felt about it, and I noticed that part of me was disappointed, not because she owed me anything, but because I had allowed myself to hope without clarity, and another part of me was relieved, because asking the question meant I was no longer trapped in my own assumptions, and when the plates were cleared and the night wound down, I left with more answers than I had before, even though none of them were clearly spoken. Because what that dinner really showed me was how easy it is to stay in situations that feel good but don't go anywhere, how comfortable ambiguity can become when you're afraid of rocking the boat, and how often we accept moments instead of asking about direction. And over the next few days I replayed that night in my head, not obsessively, but thoughtfully, trying to understand what it meant and what I wanted from it, and I realized that the question, "Is this a date?" wasn't really about the dinner at all. It was about boundaries, expectations, and self-respect. It was about recognizing that my feelings mattered enough to be acknowledged, even if the answer wasn't what I wanted. And the more I reflected on it, the more I understood that mixed signals are rarely accidental. They're often the result of someone wanting closeness without commitment, connection without responsibility, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that as long as both people are on the same page. But the problem arises when one person is quietly hoping for more while the other is content with undefined comfort, and I had to be honest with myself about where I stood, because staying in that space meant accepting uncertainty as the price of proximity, and that's a cost not everyone is willing to pay. And looking back now, I don't regret asking the question, even though it changed the energy, even though it forced a moment of vulnerability, because clarity, even partial clarity, is better than silent guessing. And that dinner taught me something important about relationships and about myself. It taught me that effort doesn't always equal intention, that intimacy doesn't always mean commitment, and that sometimes people can care about you deeply without wanting the same things you do. And learning that doesn't make the moment meaningless, it just makes it honest. And if you've ever been in a situation where someone's actions felt louder than their words, where you found yourself wondering what you were to them, where you were enjoying the present while fearing the future, then you know exactly how that dinner felt. And the lesson I walked away with is one I carry with me now, which is that asking for clarity is not asking for too much, it's asking for truth. And if the truth changes the dynamic, then the dynamic needed to change anyway, because the right connection won't make you feel confused for too long. It won't make you question where you stand every time you leave the room. And while that night didn't end with a dramatic confession or a clear label, it ended with something just as valuable: awareness. And sometimes awareness is the beginning of choosing yourself, deciding what you're willing to accept, and understanding that a table set for two doesn't always mean the same thing to both people sitting at it, but knowing that difference gives you the power to decide whether you stay seated or get up and walk towards something clearer, something mutual, something that doesn't require you to keep asking yourself the same question over and over again.